Chris, awesome to have you here joining us in the Extranet User Manager booth. Why don't you just introduce yourself quick for the group?
Well, thanks, Peter. I'm Chris McNulty. I am Director of Product Marketing on the M365 team. Our portfolio is next generation content services, which is a fairly broad set of products that includes many of our older technologies such as SharePoint, OneDrive, Microsoft Search, along with some of our new and emerging ones like Syntax, Viva, Copilot, and Stream.
It's a few products to keep under your belt there.
It keeps us busy. It does keep us busy.
Keeps you going, cool. I mean, we've known each other for a lot of years. Even before Microsoft, we were MVPs together. I guess SharePoint was our focus originally. You know, our product, Extranet User Managers, is really about how do you take all that richness from Microsoft and expose it to people outside of your organization. And often that can be overwhelming. There's so much there in the Microsoft stack. You know, give us your sense on advice to us as a vendor, how you would kind of pare that down and make it more palatable.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always going to be based on who your customers are and their use cases. In their scenarios, if you have a user of a kind of traditional extranet, they're coming to a website and they happen to be a Microsoft shop, there's patterns and things that are going to be familiar to them. But the thing is, for every one of those users, there's someone who doesn't. And it's not a matter of bringing those external users in. It's about how do we extend the data and the applications, the patterns and experiences to meet people where they are, so that they are going to be engaged in a way that makes sense.
That it's a familiar experience for them.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a big part of what we're about is, you know, sometimes you don't even see the Microsoft stack and underneath what we're doing. That there's a portal there, it's got the customer's brand on it, and like you say, we're going to their partners, their customers, their vendors in a space that's familiar and comfortable to them, and taking maybe some of the complexity away and saying this is the very small set of things that we need you to do.
Right, I mean, just, you know, from my own perspective, being at Microsoft, it's probably not a surprise we use Teams for most of our communications. There are other communications tools, and it's interesting when I have to experience them, because then it isn't obvious to me and I get things that I get to learn. But anything that can be done to kind of make my life easier, that's really not about me, but to make people similarly situated.
Like, right? Everybody wants their life to be easier, so the better you can achieve that. And I know, like, we live in Teams, we're a Microsoft partner, and occasionally I'll get a meeting invite that's a Google Meetup or it's a Zoom call. I'm like, what do I do? Where do I click? How do I get in?
Right.
And that kind of gives me a sense of, oh, that's what the other side feels like, going the other way, and how do we eliminate that sort of panic and confusion and make that simple.
And, you know, one of the things I also think that, like, building on top of the pattern that you have that kind of falls back to us at Microsoft, is to make sure that we're doing things that are more intuitive and in fact more automated. Like, if you think frankly about some of the work that we do with Syntax, with being able, you know, there's 22 products in Syntax, let's just focus on the 5 that deal with document processing.
Right.
If I'm working in an organization and I know what the content I have is and how to work with it, I can be trusted to fill out the metadata. But someone who is like unfamiliar with Teams, let alone SharePoint, and you drop them into an experience where they see like mandatory metadata, like, they're not going to do that. They're like, I just uploaded the file. I don't know what any of this means.
You deal with it from there.
And the more that you can automate that, actually you give that person a better experience throughout. And that's where, you know, the work that we do with partners like you and with what we're doing on the platform, you know, we think is really accelerating the way we deliver value and getting it to the right velocity.
I mean, AI is everywhere right now. It's a word that's getting thrown around a whole lot. There's some pretty cool.
I just went by twice. Yeah.
I mean, you said it can be overwhelming to fill out metadata as an example. Not just that, it's an annoyance. Like, why do I have to do all this work? I gave you the file, can't it be done? And we're getting there to say that, hey, Syntax can actually take that contract or agreement or formal document and pull pieces of information out of that.
Right.
Which is awesome, because then search works much better, and
search,
you know, organizing those documents
compliance
works much better.
And process. It just makes that level of precision makes all of those other goals much more achievable. But
And even if we think about non-documents, like we're launching a new media library feature as part of our content management piece of our portal. And alt text in websites, it's a common accessibility fail that people just don't provide that kind of detail in there.
Right.
And the new image tagging stuff that's in syntax that says, hey, throw a bunch of images in there and it'll actually provide some tagging. Oh, there's a dog, there's a cat, there's a sunset.
Right. And I think it's important when you're bringing up AI to think through, this is not Skynet taking over. Nor is it all that new. Like on one of my flights here, I was sitting with a lovely couple who asked what I do at Microsoft and talked a little bit about so AI, all this brand new stuff. And I'm like, let me simplify it for you. And we walked through a little bit of the Copilot architecture without using those words, but also AI is not new. Like if you're using Apple Maps, Google Maps, Waze, what have you, you're relying on AI to make it.
It's already there.
AI decision to say, based on predictions and traffic patterns, this is probably the best route. It's still up to me to decide if I want to take it. Like if my kids think it's hysterical when I turn on Waze in my hometown. They're like, because I haven't been there, don't live there anymore. Like, have you forgotten? Like, no, I haven't forgotten the roads. I don't know
what's
traffic
the
patterns,
route?
construction. Like, I want to get that data delivered to me by AI in a way that I can make the right decision. You translate that into the business environment. Like, there's way too much data. Like, I think, we've disclosed already, there are 2 billion net new documents a day that get added to M365, and it doesn't all land in one company, but some days it sure feels like it.
It's still a big number,
right? And again, getting into your use space, people have a hard time working with it when they're working with it every day, and the average extranet user is more occasional than that.
They're infrequent.
They may have, it may be once a quarter, or they may have a bursty week, and then they go away for 12 weeks. And so, the more that you can simplify the pattern recognition they have to go through, the easier it's going to be for them.
Absolutely. I was talking to somebody last week about AI, and they had a nice phrase. I don't know where they coined it from, but you need to learn to trust AI, but you also need to validate it. Mm-hmm. You can go to ChatGPT and say, write me an essay, but it may not or may not actually be accurate. You actually need to go in there and do the work. It's going to change jobs, not eliminate jobs. I think is the key thing there.
Well, if you translate that into Microsoft's architecture around this, the way we're approaching copilots, there's really 2 pieces of it. There are large language models, and there's your data. What may not be obvious is we're not taking, if you're a customer, we're not building a large language model on your data. You're not using your data to build one. The large language model is there to be interpretive about, here's what I'm looking to do, here's what this means in context, here's intent, and so forth, but making sure that you have a rich data set that then gets queried. And for that data set to work, garbage in, garbage out. Is the security right? Is the tagging right? Do we understand what's in it? Just because the number, I want to find contracts worth $1 million. Just because $1 million appears in a file, it doesn't mean that the contract is worth $1 million.
Yeah, it just happened to appear there.
Someone may just say, hey, this is $1 million idea you have there. It's like,
could be. I better check. I better validate. Yeah.
Or in Canada, what's that, $1.3 million now?
Something like that. Yeah. Beauty of coming to the US.
Yes.
Cool. So, highlights of new announcements that either you or Jeff Teeper or others are making here at the Microsoft 365 conference.
Yeah, I think what we're doing with Copilot for SharePoint, I think, is the most exciting thing for being able to use that natural language interface to bring data in to build sites, build pages, build news. It's all about ease of use. And, I think rather selfishly, we made great strides in the last decade. If you're familiar with the May 4th, 2016 Future of SharePoint event, we rolled Modern out. Modern's much easier to use.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that we should be done trying to
I don't think you're
make
ever
that accessible.
As a software company,
Right.
That's just the reality.
Right. So
there's always more to do.
I'd say that was the biggest thing I'd spotlight this morning.
Right.
There's definitely a lot that we're doing on the OneDrive space, which a lot of which we've spoken about before, but making it easier and friendlier for you to be able to group things by meetings, by people, by subjects, instead of the traditional file folder hierarchy. In the same way, we at Microsoft, we're trying to meet our users the ways that they work, which is not all libraries and folders.
Yes. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming down to join us.
Thanks for having me. Have a great conference. Great to have you here.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Cheers.